Before the world can respect you, recognize you, reward you, it must first know you. But how can the world know you if you have not yet met yourself? Most men go through life wearing masks, chasing validation, becoming what others expect instead of becoming who they were born to be. But power begins with identity. Direction begins with clarity. And greatness begins the moment you stop looking outward for answers and start looking inward for truth. When you truly know who you are, the world no longer confuses you. It begins to respond, because the man who knows himself never moves uncertainly. He walks with purpose, and the world follows. You cannot master the world until you first master yourself. That is a truth most men run from their entire lives. They try to conquer money, status, relationships, and recognition, yet remain strangers to their own mind, their own soul, their own purpose. They seek power outwardly, never realizing that real power begins inwardly. The man who walks into the world without knowing who he is will always be led by it. He will be influenced by opinions, controlled by trends, swayed by emotions, and trapped in cycles of confusion. But the man who has taken the time to master himself becomes immovable. He is not reactive, he is deliberate. He does not chase approval, he moves with clarity. His emotions do not run his decisions command his emotions, because he has learned the most valuable skill on earth, the ability to rule from within. Every empire ever built by man began with discipline, not over land, not over resources, but over the self. The discipline to think, to pause, to choose. And you too must build that empire inside before you ever attempt to build anything outside. When a man lacks self-mastery, he becomes a servant to everything around him. He says yes when he should say no. He follows when he was born to lead. He doubts his voice, questions his instinct, and fears his own reflection. Why? Because he's never met the real man underneath the performance, the man beneath the fear, the one who's been silenced by years of people-pleasing and approval-seeking. But here's the truth. The moment you decide to stop running from yourself, you'll find every answer you've ever been searching for. The journey doesn't begin with ambition. It begins with awareness. What do you believe? What drives you? What are your values, your fears, your patterns? Most people avoid these questions. They'd rather chase achievement than truth. But you can achieve without knowing yourself and still feel lost, still feel empty, still feel like a fraud. Why? Because success without self-knowledge is a performance. It's fragile. It breaks under pressure. But when your success is rooted in self-mastery, it doesn't shake. It doesn't break, because it was built from the inside out. To master yourself, you must face yourself. You must become brutally honest. You must be willing to confront the lies you've accepted, the mask you've worn, the roles you've played to fit in, to survive, to be accepted. And when you strip those layers away, something incredible is revealed. Clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't need to shout, the kind that stands tall without apology, the kind that no longer begs the world to notice because it has already claimed its place. Once you know yourself, you no longer operate from need, you operate from truth. You stop reacting to the world and begin shaping it. You're no longer driven by what's popular, but by what's purposeful. You stop trying to be liked and instead become respected, because the man who has mastered himself carries a different energy. You feel it when he walks in the room. You hear it when he speaks. He doesn't need to compete because he is complete. That kind of power can't be faked. It can't be bought. It can't be borrowed. It must be earned through reflection, through discipline, through brutal honesty and daily practice. But once it is earned, it is unshakable. And from that foundation, the world begins to respond. Opportunities appear. People listen. Environments shift. Because the man who knows himself no longer needs to chase recognition. The world recognizes him naturally, not because he demands it, but because he has become it. Identity precedes destiny. Before any man can change his circumstances, he must first change the way he sees himself. You cannot rise into a life you do not believe you deserve. You cannot claim a future that your mind has already disqualified you from. The world around you will always respond to the identity you carry within, not the one you project, not the one you perform, but the one you actually believe. And if that belief is built on insecurity, fear, doubt, or unworthiness, then no amount of effort will ever give you the life you're chasing, because your actions will always retreat to the level of your identity. What you believe about yourself becomes the silent architect of your future. It determines what you allow, what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you walk away from. A man who sees himself as small will never reach for something great. A man who views himself as a failure will sabotage his success before it even begins. But the man who sees himself as a builder, as a creator, as a conqueror, he will keep moving even when the path is uncertain. Why? Because his identity tells him, this is who I am. This is what I do. You must begin to ask yourself, not just what do I want, but who do I believe I am? Because desire alone cannot override identity. A man may want wealth, freedom, impact, and influence, but if he still sees himself as a victim, as broken, as average, he will never sustain the success he touches. He may get it briefly, but he will let it go. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but because he hasn't yet accepted the identity that matches it. You can only hold what your mind believes you're worthy of. That's why transformation begins in thought. The renewal of your life begins with the renewal of your self-image. If you want to change your results, don't start with your circumstances, start with your story. Rewrite the script you've been repeating. Challenge the labels you've accepted. Ask yourself, who told me I couldn't? And more importantly, why did I believe them? Because somewhere along the way, someone planted a seed in your mind, and that seed grew into a belief. But not all beliefs are true, and many of them are not yours. They were given to you by fear, by failure, by family, by society. You must decide which ones to uproot and which ones to cultivate. The truth is, you are not your past, you are not your mistakes, you are not your environment, you are the designer of your life, but only if you reclaim that authority, only if you say, I am no longer who I used to be, I'm no longer accepting an identity that was given to me by pain. I will now define myself on purpose. That's when destiny begins to shift. That's when doors open. That's when the impossible starts to feel inevitable, not because the world changed, but because you did. When you know who you are, the world no longer confuses you. You stop chasing what was never meant for you. You stop shrinking to fit where you no longer belong. You stop settling for less than what your future demands. And that clarity, rooted in identity, gives birth to a new level of discipline, confidence, and momentum. The world recognizes the man who knows himself because he walks with certainty, not arrogance, certainty. Because he no longer wonders if he can win. He knows he was built to. And that knowing, that becomes his destiny. Silence the noise to hear the truth within. That's where the real answers live. Not in the opinions of others, not in the crowd's approval, not in the endless distractions of the world, but in the still, quiet voice that's been with you all along. The reason most people never come to know themselves is because they've never truly been alone with their thoughts. Their thoughts, they've drowned out the truth with noise, constant activity, shallow conversations, endless scrolling, and 1,000 voices telling them who to be, how to act, what to chase. But the man who rises above the noise is the one who dares to be. You cannot know yourself until you have the courage to turn down the volume of the world, because self-acknowledge requires listening. Listening requires quiet, and quiet takes discipline. It means saying no to what is easy so you can say yes to what is necessary. It means walking away from environments that distract, conversations that drain, and patterns that numb. You will never hear the truth within you if you are always reacting to the chaos around you. You must create space to think, because thinking is the foundation of wisdom. In the silence, things become clear. You begin to notice your thoughts. You begin to understand your fears. You start asking questions that actually matter. What do I believe? What do I stand for? What am I doing with my life? These are not easy questions. That's why most people avoid them. They fill their time with movement to avoid meaning. They prefer noise over awareness. because awareness demands responsibility. But until you face those questions, you'll remain a stranger to your own purpose. The world has taught you to listen outward, to follow trends, to seek validation, to be whatever it takes to be accepted. But acceptance from others means nothing if it costs you yourself. What good is applause if it drowns out your own voice? What good is success if it's built on an identity you never chose? You must take back the power to listen within, because deep down, you already know what you were made to do. You've just been too busy, too distracted, too afraid to listen. Real strength is found in silence, not in the absence of sound, but in the presence of clarity. When you slow down long enough to hear your own mind, you begin to uncover the patterns that have shaped your decisions. You begin to realize what beliefs are driving you, whether they are empowering or limiting. And once you become aware of them, you can change them. You can choose new thoughts. You can build new patterns. And in doing so, you begin to shape a new identity, one that is rooted in who you are, not who you've been told to be. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs a man who is original, a man who is not afraid to stand alone if it means standing in truth. And that kind of man is born in silence. That kind of man is forged in stillness. He listens not to fit in, but to find direction. He moves not to impress, but to align. And when he speaks from depth, not from noise. So if you want to know yourself, if you want the world to respond to the real you, then begin by creating silence. Shut out the noise. Step away from the crowd. And listen not to what the world wants from you, but to what your soul is calling you to become. In that silence, you will find clarity. And in that clarity, you will find power. You must choose who you are before the world labels you. If you don't define yourself with intention, the world will define you by assumption. And the world always defines too small. It looks at your past, your failures, your fears, your limitations, and builds a box around you. And if you are not conscious, you will accept that box. You will live in it, shrink in it, and die in it, never realizing you had the power to step out the entire time. But identity is not something given to you. It is something claimed. It is chosen, forged, and reinforced through decision. Every day, the world will try to assign you a name. Too quiet, too slow, too old, too young, not enough, never will be. But none of those names matter if you've already decided who you are. That decision must be made in the quiet of your own mind, where no one else can interfere, where you look yourself in the mirror and say, this is who I am, and I don't need your permission to be it. You are not what they say you are. You are not the job title, the GPA, the background, or the broken pieces. You are what you choose to believe, build, and become. And that choice belongs to you alone. There comes a point in every man's life when he must make a bold decision, not about what to do, but about who to be. Because who you decide to be will determine what you do, how you respond, what you tolerate, and how far you go. The power of that identity will either free you or bind you. If you choose passively, you'll live passively. You'll move through life with no clarity, saying yes to everything and everyone. Unsure of why, nothing ever feels quite right. But if you choose intentionally, if you say, I am a builder, a leader, a finisher, a man of purpose, then every decision becomes clear. Your yes has meaning. Your no has power. Your direction becomes undeniable. You don't need the world to understand your decision. You need to be at peace with it. You need to commit to it. Because the moment you define yourself clearly, the world begins to adjust. People begin to treat you differently, not because they changed, but because you did. When you're certain about who you are, you stop tolerating confusion. You stop entertaining doubt. You stop explaining your worth to people who never took the time to understand it in the first place. But defining yourself isn't a one-time event. It's a daily choice. The world will test you. Life will challenge that definition. Circumstances will try to make you forget who you decided to be. That's why self-definition must be rooted in principle, not feeling, because feelings change, pressure comes, but principles hold. So every day you wake up and affirm, this is who I am, this is who I choose to be, and I will not shrink for comfort or approval. You were never meant to be defined by others. You were meant to define yourself with such clarity that the world has no choice but to follow your lead. And when you move through life from that place of conviction, your energy changes. Your presence speaks before your words ever do. You no longer beg for respect, you command it. Not through force, but through identity. The man who knows who he is does not need to shout. His life becomes the statement, his actions become the proof, and his legacy becomes inevitable.